All right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I don't even know. Happy chapter 26, Perek Kaf Vav. And we're going to see the return of the Zifim, the Ziphites, and we're going to see a return of Shaul chasing David. And it all feels like it's deja vu all over again, in the words of Yogi Berra. But in fact, we're going to see some nuances here, and we're going to enjoy this chapter. There's a lot of commentary on it, and we are going to get started right away. Here you can see my screen, and we're going to see our good friends, the Zifim, who David Hamelech wrote about. Not only is he mentioned, are they mentioned in Shmuel Aleph, but David talks about them in Tehillim, in the book of Psalms. He writes a lot about them, that they just maligned him for no good reason, and how upsetting they were to him. As it says at the beginning here, Vayavo'u hazifim el Shaul hagivata lemor. Hello, David, mistate begevat ha'achila al penei ha'shimon. And the Ziphites came to Shaul to give saying, is not David hiding in the hill of Hachila before the desolate wasteland? Bet vayakom Shaul vayered el midbar Zif, ואיתו 3,000 איש בחורי ישראל לבקש את דוד במדבר Zif. And Shaul arose and descended to the desert of Zif, and with him were 3,000 picked men to seek David in the desert of Zif. ויחן שאול בגבעת האכילה, אשר על פני הישימון, על הדרך, ודוד יושב במדבר, וירא, כי בא שאול אחריו המדברה. And Shaul encamped in the hill of Achila, which is before the desolate wasteland by the road, and David was staying in the desert, and it appeared to him that Shaul had come after him to the desert. And then we have Pasuk Daled, Vayishlach David meragelim, Vayeda, Kiva Shaul el Nachon. And David sent spies, and he learned that Shaul had surely come. Now we're going to have a look at the Mefarshim on this. And we have to ask ourselves, is this a straight repeat, or are we learning something new here? So all the commentaries, including the Ma'am Loez, say the following, that the Ziphites tried again. This is the second time where they're trying to inform on David. And the Ma'am Loez adds that they slandered David before Shaul, accusing of hiding and plotting against against the king. As they say, surely David hides in the hill of Hachila. Why would he be doing this if not to usurp the throne? The Ziphites assumed that Shmuel, until this time, had been protecting David. Now that the Shmuel HaNavi had passed, they wanted David removed, as they also feared that they would share the same fate as Naval. So what?
So can I just ask a question, because it seems a little confusing? Because it seems that sometimes people know that David is supposed to be king, and sometimes it's obvious that people don't know.
Okay, so here's what's going on. The Ziphites are from Yehuda. They're also from Yehuda, and they seem to have a similar mindset to Naval, which is, who is this David, this Ben Yishai, to be usurping the throne from Shaul? And they could be asking it from a perspective of, no one should usurp the throne from the current king. Or it's more pointed that they are saying, we are Bnei Yehuda. We're the ones who should be the leaders of Yehuda. If it's going to come from Yehuda, let it be the Bnei Zifim, or let it be Naval. So it's coming to tell us something profound. They're saying, you know what? We're biding our time. We really don't like David, and therefore we attacked the first time, and it didn't work out for us. But now that Shmuel has died, there's no one to protect him. He has no political cover. He has no base. Or now that he's done what he did to Naval, and Naval was killed and everything else, again, you could see that as the hand of God, but they could also have seen it that David showing his authority over them. They're saying, we just don't believe that that David should be king. We don't believe that he is God's divine. So what they're arguing isn't David's political status. They acknowledge that David is politically up there and is a worthy person to be challenging for the throne. What they're denying is they don't think, it couldn't possibly cross their mind that he is God's divine person to be king. They think that's Shaul. He was appointed publicly by Shmuel, and that David is an upstarter. And they're also arguing and saying, not only is he an upstarter, but if someone's going to come from David, from Yehuda, it should be us. And that's why they're saying we don't want him to be king. So now that Shmuel passed, they wanted David removed, because they said, we don't want to have the same fate of Naval, that when he becomes king, he's going to demand from us things, and if we don't give it to him, we're going to be killed. Now, another difference here from how it is in Perek Kav Gimel from chapter 23 is that David sent spies. Says the Radak, Rav David Kimchi of Provence, why does David send spies? To know for sure Shaul's intentions. Since Shaul had promised not to pursue David, he wants to know why are they back again? Is it like it seems that he's reneged on his promise, or is there something more, less? It doesn't look as bad as it seems. That's the pshat. The Ma'am Loez says something even more profound. And he says, from here we see how an exchange of their positions had already began to materialize. Whereas earlier, Shaul had sent spies to discover David's location, now David was the one sending spies. What are we saying here? That David is already being manifest as king. He's already taking on this leadership. The fact that he is the one who is sending spies to find out what's going on with Shaul, rather than Shaul's camp trying to infiltrate David's, it's now David's camp is infiltrating Shaul. It's almost like the prophecy is coming true. David is becoming king right away. We're ready almost for Shaul to fall in battle and for David to take on the leadership. And so we continue in the commentary, in the Psukim, and we go to Pasuk He, Pasuk 5, Vayakom David, Vayavo el hamakom asher chana sham Shaul, ויד דוד את המקום ששכב שם שאול, ואבנר בן נר שר צבאו, ושאול שוכב במגל, והעם חונים סביבותיו. And David arose and he came to the place where Shaul had encamped. And David saw the place where Shaul lay, and Avner, the son of Ner, now the commander of his army, and Shaul were lying within the barricade, this circle, and the people were encamped around him. It's almost like you've got electrons. You remember learning it in chemistry, how you have the nucleus, and then around it you have the 2 electrons, and then the 8 electrons, and another layer of electrons. So it's kind of like how that was. Shaul and Avner are in the center, and then you've got other more important people around them, and lesser people around them, and lesser people around them, and that's how they did it. They would protect the most important, or the most vulnerable would be in the center, and you have people going around them in concentric circles. Pasuk Vav, Vayan David, Vayome el Achimelech Achiti, ve'el Avishai ben Tzeruya, Achi Yoav lemor, mi yered iti el Shaul el hamachane, Vayome Avishai, ani yered imach. And David spoke up and said to Achimelech the Hittite, and to Avishai ben Tzeruya, the brother of Yoav, who will go down with me to Shaul to the camp? And Avishai said, I will go down with you. So we have the question, what is going on here is David? Why is he asking who wants to go down? Surely he should just say, this person should come with me, or we're doing this, he should be commanding. Says Ma'am Loez, we learn another fundamental about David. It was not David's way to lord over his men. He left it up to them to decide if they would join him. A commander has two choices. A commander can say, here's what's happening, and his men will follow him. Or a commander can say, I'm going, who's with me? Either way, he's showing who is in charge, but he's building them up to say, here's what's happening. It's a dangerous mission. I'm not forcing you on this dangerous mission. If you want to come with me, Shalom Yisrael, and that's what happens. And that's why it's only one of them and not two of them who goes, either because they only wanted one, or because only Avishai said he wanted to go. Pasuk Zayin, Vayavo David va'Avishai el ha'am laila, and David and Avishai came to the people by night. והנה שאול שוכב ישן במגל, וחניתו מאוחה בארץ מרעשותיו, ואבני העם שוכבים סביבותיו. And David and Avishai came to you by night, and behold, Shaul was lying asleep within this inner circle, with his spear thrust into the ground at his head, and Avner and the people were lying around him. ויאמר אבישי אל דוד, ציגר אלוהים היום את אויבך בידיך, ואתה עקנו נא בחנית ובארץ פעם אחת, ולא אשנה לו. And Avishai said to David, today God has delivered your enemy into your hand, or God has closed him up. We all know about seger right now, because that's a word we've been using a lot in Israel to describe being during this time of coronavirus. God has delivered your enemy into your hand, or he's closed him off. Let me strike him now with the spear to the ground with one stroke, and I shall not repeat this to him. Vayomer David el Avishai, אל תשחיתהו, כי מי שלח ידו במשיח אדוני וניקה. But David said to Ishai, do not destroy him, for who can stretch forth his hand against God's anointed and be accounted guiltless? And then Yud, Vayomer David, Chai Adonai, ki im Adonai, יגפנו או יומו יבוא ומת, או במלחמה ירד ונספה. But David said, as Hashem lives, but Hashem will smite him, or his day will come and he will die, or he will go down to war and perish. חלילה לי מאדוני, משלוח ידי במשיח אדוני, ואתה קחנה את החנית, אשר מרעשותיו, ואת ספחת המים, ונלכה לנו. Far be it from me, from Hashem, to stretch forth my hand against Hashem's anointed, and now take now the spear which is at the head and the jug of water, and let us go away. Yud Bet, Vayikach David et החנית ואת ספחת המים מרעשותי שאול, וילכו להם, ואין רואה, ואין יודע, ואין מקיץ, כי כולם ישנים, כי תרדמת אדוני נפלה עליהם. And David took the spear and the jug of water from near Shaul's head, and they went away, and no one saw, and no one knew, and no one was awakened, for they were all asleep. Why? Because a deep sleep from Hashem had fallen upon them. And there's a number of questions that we need to ask ourselves on these psukim. Number one, what does this mean? Let me strike him down and I won't need to do it twice. And what is David's return to this position of, I want to go there, almost like I need to see him, but I'm not going to kill him, because he's the Mashiach Hashem. What is this? He is God's anointed, I can't do anything. And then why is David saying, by God lives, if Hashem says? It seems like he's doing a double version here. There's an oath, and far be it from me to kill the Mashiach Hashem. And then David in Pasuk Yud Bet says, take the spear and the jug. But in Yud Gimel, it says, David, sorry, in Yud Aleph he says, take it, but in Yud Bet, in 12, it's David who takes the spear and the jug. So we've got to answer these questions. So we go over here let me strike him one time. This is what this is what Avi. 1 second, my mind is going blank. This is what Avishai, is saying. And we go here, and Avishai says, "Let me strike him once." Why strike him once? The Radak says, "I will not require a second time because I will kill him with one strike." The Malbim says, "Do not worry, his men will not hear him cry out because I'm going to kill him in one strike." And the Ma'am Loez says, just as Yael killed Sisera with one strike, so too Avishai says, I know exactly how I'm going to do it, how I'm going to kill Shaul. So it's this is a very powerful, Avishai knows exactly what he's going to do. There should be no fears about how he's planning this regicide. And David says, how can we strike God's anointed? The Malbim says, even if it's permitted to kill a person who seeks to take your life, what's known as a rodef, it is forbidden to kill Shaul, for he is God's anointed. There's a difference. Granted, Shaul wants to kill us, but we're not allowed to kill him because he is God's anointed. And he says here, as the Lord lives, God will. Rashi says on this, some say that David took an oath to himself, to his own Yetzer Hara, to his own temptation, that he would not kill Shaul. While others say he took an oath to Avishai, if you kill God's anointed, Shaul, I will mingle your blood with his blood. As if you kill him, I will be forced to kill you. The Ma'am Loez says, David twice recalled God's name, one as a promise to himself that he would not kill Shaul, and once as an oath that there will be someone who would. So here, the Ma'am Loez is different to Rashi. They both agree that David is saying, I won't kill Shaul. That's fine. But the other one is very different. For Rashi, it's saying, if you kill him, I'm going to have to kill you. But Ma'am Loez is saying something far different. He's saying, I cannot kill Shaul, you can't kill Shaul, but please let someone kill Shaul, just not let it be us. Let it be the Pelishtim, let it be the Goyim, but it cannot be us because he is God's anointed. However, far be it from me to say, I don't want it to happen. I do want it to happen, just Khalila, that it will be me. Says the Ma'am Loez, David said to himself, I might be saved by killing Shaul, but will bring about great danger upon the nation. Why? The Philistine will hear that the king of Israel has died, and they will come to wage war against us. It would be better to die than to bring about this tragedy. Okay? Now, David takes the spear and the jug. As I said, David asked Avishai to take the spear and the jug. So if he asked him in Yud Aleph, why is he then taking it himself in Yud Bet? Says the Radak, David took them because he was concerned that Avishai would not be able to control himself, and because he was so excited about striking him, that he would strike Shaul. The Ma'am Loez says he took these things to hint to Shaul and his soldiers that they would neither be saved by their weapons, nor would they have sufficient food and supplies. And again, this is Ma'am Loez's position of, I can't kill you, but I hope it happens. Because as soon as Shaul is killed, I can be king. The only problem is, I can't do it directly. A deep slumber of God had fallen over them. Says the Malbim, this was clearly the hand of God, for there is always someone who remains awake to protect the king from any harm. So the fact that every single person out of 3,000 men, every single person is asleep, there must be something going on here to tell us there's more happening here than meets the eye. Now we carry on, and now that David and Avishai have the spear and the jug, they're now going to make a run for it. And they're going to call out to Shaul's camp. So Yud Gimel, Vaya'avod David ha'ever, and David crossed to the other side. Vaya'amod al Rosh Hahar merachok, Rab hamakom benehem. And he stood on the mountain peak from afar, and the space between them was great. What does it mean? The space between them was great. What's going on? So we look at the Mefarshim. At a distance, great was the separation between them. The Ralbag, the Gersonides says, he was at the top of the mountain so that his words could better be heard. Okay? The Ma'am Noel says, Shaul's men were in such a deep sleep that David and Avishai were able to cover a large distance. The Malbim says no, rather than an actual distance, the separation between them was small, but it seemed great because of the incline of the mountain, which made it difficult for anyone to ascend. So trying to understand what's happening here, what does it mean that was great? It doesn't mean it was a great distance. Well, that's how Loez understands it. It means it was great because it was impossible, because they were in the upper and they were in the lower, they couldn't get there. So either you can understand it like Ralbag and you can understand it like there's two, you can understand it like two of the commentaries. I can look at Ralbag and Malbim as two, which is he wants his voice to be heard down, but they're not far away, it's just up and down. Or I can see it as Mamloez, that they were running away and they'd actually gone very far away to do so. Either way, they've got this far, and now they feel safe that they're going to call out to the group.
I'd like to point something out, though. There was a lot of time had passed, though. If you look in verse 12, there's a repetition. In verse 12, it says, nobody saw it, nobody knew it, and nobody woke up. Why does it say three times? It could just say, nobody saw it. Or it could just say, nobody knew it.
So this is the beauty of understanding text, Rob. It's a beautiful question, which is, and I'm just going to share my screen so we can see it's inside in the text.
I have a suspicion to the answer. The reason why it's mentioned three times and there's a triple repetition is because there were three watches that were kept throughout the night. And it wasn't just that they were in a deep sleep, they were in a long sleep. That's
beautiful, beautiful. So exactly right. Enyo Dea Emekitz is representing three separate stages. And as our rabbis decided that they divide up the night into three, it could be they were asleep for the entire period. But when we go here and see the phrases merachok, rav hamakom benehem, they were far, there was a great space between them. It seems on the pshat level, based on what you're saying, Rob, that the Mamloez is the pshat. So that must have been they were asleep for 24 hours. Not 24 hours, for the whole nighttime. But on the other hand, what's the other likely thing? Is that they were able to just escape and they still wanted to be heard. So how could they make sure that they were heard? Either they were far away, but because sound travels from the mountainside, from the top down, they could make sure that they were heard, or it's saying they weren't actually far away. They were just difficult to get to. So definitely we could look at it even from a pshat level, both the midrash, the three, that it represents three stages and it's the whole night, or only a short time period, both can explain on a straight way of understanding the text. Either they were very far away, but they had a mouthpiece, as it were, a loudspeaker system to get their voice heard, or they were just difficult to get to, and that's why they felt like they were far away, but they weren't physically that far. But I love how you're looking at Rob at that triplicate language to imply that. Now let's hear the musar, the rebuke that David gives to Avner. So we see as follows: Yud Daled, Vayikra David el ha'am ve'el Avner ben Ner. And David called to the people and to Avner ben Ner. And we have to ask ourselves that question: why does he call to the people and to Avner specifically, saying, "Halo ta'aneh Avner vaya'an Avner vayomer mi ata karata el hamelech"? Will you not answer, Avner? And Avner answered and said, "Who are you who have called to the king?" So let's just jump in before we look at the rest of the conversation. Look at this commentary on David called out to the people and to Avner. The Radak says, after he called to the people without receiving a reply, David called Avner by name. The Midrash relates that David sent to him, "When I cut off the corner of the king's robe in the cave, all the way back a few chapters ago, in the cave, you claimed I had found it after it had been torn off by thorns. You claimed that had I truly been in the cave, you would have cut me to pieces. Well, what do you have to say now? Here, see the spear, see the jug which I have in my hand. Will you not answer, Avner?" What is David's rebuke? David's rebuke is, "Miata, who are you?" You know what the problem is? Shaul is easily manipulated. I'm trying to manipulate him a little bit and telling him that I love him. You're trying to manipulate him. The Ziphites are trying to manipulate him. Doeg ha'adomi, Doeg the Edomites trying to manipulate him. What is Shaul? Shaul's a weak character. And there's all these puppeteers who are controlling him. And one moment, "I love you, David, I'm not going to do anything." Next moment, people are being malshin David, they're speaking about him negatively. And suddenly, Shaul is back chasing him. And David is basically saying, why can't you just give him some good advice? Can't you stop being so jealous of me? What is it? Why do you have it in for me from day one? I love the king, and you've just been pushing on me for no reason. So David says to Avner, and Tetvav here, "Vayomer David el Avner, halo ish ata, umi kamocha b'Yisrael, ולמה לא שמרת אל אדונך המלך, כי בא אחד העם להשחית את המלך אדונך? Are you not an ish, a man, a strong man? And who is like you in Israel? Why did you not guard your lord the king? For one of the people come to destroy the king, your lord. לא טוב הדבר הזה אשר עשית. חי אדוני, כי בני מוות אתם, אשר לא שמרתם על אדוניכם. המשיח אדוני, ואתה ראה איך חנית המלך ואת ספחת המים אשר מרעשותיו. The thing which you have done is not good. By God, you are worthy of death, for you did not keep watch over your Lord, over God's anointed. And now, see where the king's spear is and the jug of water which was at his head. See what's going on. Why didn't you behave like loyal servants? If you're really defending the king, if that's what you claim, why aren't you doing that? How could you fall asleep? Yud Zayin, Vayakesh Shaul el kol David, Vayomer hakolcha ze b'ni David, Vayomer David koli Adoni HaMelech. Shaul recognized David's voice and said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And David said, "It is my voice, my Lord, O King." Yudchet, Vayomer, lama ze Adoni rodef achrei avdo, ki me asiti, ume biyadi ra'a. And he said, why does my Lord pursue his servant? For what have I done? And what evil is in my hand? What's going on here? You see, there's a difference here between the way that David talks to Shaul HaMelech, to King Saul, and how he talks to Shaul's servants. And the Ma'am Loez says as follows: the Talmud, our sages said, it is the way of the man who conducts himself properly to direct his words of rebuke to the servants and his words of appeasement to the most prominent. This is what David did. When he addressed Shaul, he spoke consolingly and lovingly. Why is it that my master pursues his servants? But when he addressed Avner, he spoke harshly. This deed which you have done is not good. You are deserving of death for not having kept watch over your master, the anointed of God. If you really say you are only serving your master, how can you fall asleep? You only persecute me because of jealousy and hatred for me, because of kina and tava and sinna. Okay, we know these things. Desire, hatred, jealousy. Those are the things which take a person out of this world. You're not in this because you love Shaul. You're not a dedicated servant. You just don't like the fact that I was once close with the king and you weren't the number one servant. And we continue here, and it says, V'ata yishma na Adoni HaMelech et divrei avdo, ki im Hashem hesitcha bi yarach mincha, v'im b'nei adam arurim hem lifnei Adonai, ki gershuni hayom, mistapeach benachalat Adonai lemor, lech avod Elohim acherim. And now, let now my Lord the King hear his servant's words. If Hashem has incited you against me, he will accept an offering. But if the Son of Man, cursed be they before Hashem, for they have driven me today from cleaving to Hashem's heritage, saying, go worship other gods. Va'ata al yipol dami alza me'eneged penei Adonai, ki yatsa melech Yisrael levakesh et paro shechad kasher yirdof hakoreh be'arim. And now let not my blood fall to the ground away from the face of Hashem, for the king of Israel has gone out to seek a flea as a partridge hunts in the mountains. And now we need to try to understand these metaphors. What is a flea? What is a partridge in the mountains? What does David mean by saying they're making me worship other gods? And now, with the exception of Eliot, we're all going to get some deep musar, which should hurt us very painfully as we think about this. Go worship other gods. Rashi quotes the Gemara Masechet Ketubot. One who goes out of Eretz Yisrael to other lands is considered as though he worshipped idols. What's it saying? It's foreshadowing that in the next chapter, David is going to have to leave Eretz Yisrael and he's going to have to go to the land of the Pelishtim. It's interesting to note that there is an older version of Rashi which seems to have been corrupted, because it says it's only Vizman Bet HaMikdash. It's only when there's the temple stands, that's when it's like you're worshiping idols. But all the other time, it's not worshiping idols to live in another country. That's not the pshat of the Gemara in Ketubot. And we actually learned, says the Imam Noez, I didn't bring it down, even if the majority of people living in Israel are idolaters, it's still better to live in the land of Israel. But now when the majority of people are Jewish, and the majority of Jews are living in Israel, how much more so we should be in there. So we should take on that musar very strongly, and we should feel it. It's not right bisman Beit HaMikdash. It's not just when the temple is standing. It's all times where we should feel that pain. Now we're going to continue and understand some more of this. Like the partridge in the mountains, says the Rashi. What does this mean, a partridge in the mountains? As the partridge which hatches the eggs which she has not laid, and it hunts after the nests of other birds and sits on them. What does it mean? But you're not really explaining the metaphor. The Imam Loez helps us. David was subtly alluding to Shaul that his fate would be like that of the partridge. Just as the partridge chases in the mountains after the eggs of other birds, but is unable to keep them. Why? Because as soon as those eggs hatch, they go back to their own kind. So too, Shaul, who chased after David, would be unable to keep his throne. Eventually, I will become king. Alternatively, David is saying, could it be that the king of Israel finds delight in hunting a single flea rather than the sport of kings to hunt the partridge in the mountains? What's he saying here? What's the role of a king? A king should be hunting birds, which should be, you should be going after the Philistine. You shouldn't be going after me. I'm a nothing, I'm a nobody, because I am no threat to you. Yes, I want to be king. Yes, I am the king, but I'm only going to be king once you pass away. I have no interest in taking your crown. It's only if you are killed by external forces that I will take on the kingdom of being the king of the Jewish people. Now we'll finish the last few psukim. Vayomer Shaul, so Shaul is going to reply to David, Chatati shuv beni David, ki lo ara lecha od tachat asher yokra nafshi be'enecha hayom hazeh, hinei hiskalti ve'eshke harbe ma'od. Shaul said, I've sinned. Return, my son David, for I shall harm you no more, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have acted foolishly and have erred exceedingly. Kafbet, Vayan David, Vayomer, and David answered and he said, Hinei Chanit HaMelech, behold the king's spear, Vaya'avor echad me'anarim v'yikacheha. Now let one of the youths come over and take it. David still doesn't trust Shaul. Why? He knows that Shaul loves him, but he also knows that Shaul is easily changed by his men. And so therefore he says, I don't trust you. So send one of your youths to come and take back your spear. I'm not going to return it to you directly, because in just a second you could change your mind and kill me. Kaf Gimel, והשם ישיב לאיש את צדקתו ואת אמונתו אשר נתנך אדוני היום ביד ולא אביתי לשלוח ידי במשיח אדוני. And Hashem will repay every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness, for God delivered you today into my hand, and I would not stretch forth my hand against God's anointed. והנה כאשר גודלה נפשך היום הזה בעיניי, כן תגדל נפשי בעיני אדוני, ויצילני מכל צרה. And behold, as your life was precious this day in my eyes, so shall my life be precious in the eyes of Hashem, and he shall save me from every distress. Okay, so we see here David's prayer is saying, you know, at the right time, let me be king. And at the right time, I realize that my life is also very, very fragile, and I need God's protection. And Shaul said to David, ויאמר שאול לדוד, ברוך אתה בני דוד, גם עשור תעשה וגם יכול תוכל, וילך דוד לדרכו, ושאול שב למקומו. Blessed be you, my son David. You shall both do great things, and you shall prevail. And David went on his way, and Shaul returned to his palace. It's almost as if the chapter never happened. And they all lived happily ever after. It's a bit of a quiet before the storm. It's, David, please God, when it's your time, you'll be king. But right now it's my time. I'm going back to the palace. You go back to where you're going, and we'll see what happens in Camp Zion. But it's a very interesting thing that if you just had David and you just had Shaul, and the two of them were left alone with no advisors and no nothing, David is strong enough to hold back his advisors, and he can tell them, you're wrong. Whereas Shaul is manipulated by his advisors. And this is the whole thing. I feel sorry for Shaul. It's not that Shaul is this crazy, power-hungry person who can't let go of it. He's the manipulated person who doesn't know what to do. And therefore, we have to have sympathy and compassion for him rather than feel that he's this aggressor every time. And that's it. Any questions on Shaul? On Shmuel chapter 26.
I'd like to bring something up, please.
Sure.
So in this episode here at the end of the chapter, it reminds me a lot of when Jacob went into Isaac. We have a father that can't really see his son too well. In this case, it's David is very far away, and the father is seeking certainty for the identity of the son, which also happens here. And there is some accoutrements involved. In this case, it's a spear and a water jug. Last time it was a stew and some goat skin, and it ends up with the father giving the son the blessing. And it's different this time around though, because there's no deception. And for all the times that David deceived Saul or tried to trick him, everything is now out in the open and everything's clear, and there's certainty to the identities of the people. And we're about to move on to the next chapters of the Jewish people, and I think this little episode is a way of clearing the air and restoring a new paradigm between fathers and sons, and patriarchs blessing each other in a way that undoes the deceptions of Jacob and Isaac.
I think that's beautiful, Rob, and I think it's absolutely right. It's segueing perfectly into David's rule, because this is the last real time that David has an interaction with Shaul. He's no longer going to have any more interactions with Yehonatan, and they can both go with clean consciences that the last time they interact, it's with emet, it's with truth. I acknowledge that you're the future king. That's Shaul, and David's acknowledging you are the king, and I may want to be king, but nothing is going to make that happen until you go out to war against the Pelishtim. And it's absolutely right, and it's a new paradigm that we must treat each other with hard truths. The hard truths are better than soft lies. And again, maybe that's just talking to my nature of I like to tell people how I feel, I like to tell the truth. But in the long run, I believe that hard truths, maybe softly spoken, are far more valuable in the long term, and will create emet, will create truth, and will create shalom, and will create peace. And that's what we're always trying to do. Emet v'shalom yachdav. We want those two together, even though sometimes they can be contradictory. Truth and peace should be together. And that concludes today's class.